Jonathan Rhyne was once a lawyer, drowning in repetitive tasks and legal documents, until he left the firm in 2011 to bootstrap Nutrient, his own technology company. Today, Nutrient powers AI-driven document intelligence and workflow automation for thousands of businesses in 80 countries, including 15% of the Global 500. So we talked about the hype versus reality of AI and why Jonathan believes technology should serve people, not the other way around, in a fascinating conversation on this bonus episode of The Business of Tech. Well, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Dave. It's good to be here.
Now, I got to start with the origin story a little bit because you went from practicing law to founding a tech company. I feel like there's a breaking point there that made you pivot out of law into building Nutrient. Tell me a little bit about what that was.
It's actually kind of crazy. I was a gamer growing up, went to computer science for 2 years, went to poli-sci, went to law, came out and it was 2009, the worst time to graduate law school. And luckily it was also a year before or a year after the iPhone SDK came out. My brother was working as a government contractor in DC, and ultimately wanted to use a Mac fanboy before it was cool. So hopefully long story short, he started a business. He was going to these conferences. I was like, hey, what's going on there? Are there lawyers there? Met my two business partners after building a practice, basically becoming the iPhone attorney guy is what I like to say. And my wife, pregnant with our first kid, living with our in-laws, I decided to leave a partnership track on a law firm to join a crazy Austrian, 4,600 miles away from me. So it's a really crazy story. Looking back now as, I have three kids and a family. I don't know if I would have done it then, but that was ultimately the quick and dirty way I went from lawyer to ultimately running a tech company.
Now, give me a little bit of perspective then. What does Nutrient do?
Yeah. So, Nutrient, ultimately, if you know Xerox, and Xerox used to be the document company, and I had this vision of there isn't a digital document company. There's DocuSign that does agreements. I don't know. There's Microsoft that does all business software and everything. And Adobe kind of, looks more at creatives now than they do, and PDF is their legacy. And so there's this clear niche and need in the kind of B2B space that's just not done with core document technology. And what a lot of people don't realize is when you look into it, there's really very few companies that have created proprietary technology around it that are ultimately licensing it everywhere. And so, we started out in the mobile viewing space, building just essentially Adobe Acrobat for mobile apps. Then we went into web when WebAssembly came out. We got acquired by PE money and ultimately did what PE-backed companies do. You go buy other companies. So we looked in the Microsoft 365 space and said, hey, this looks like our core technology, but built as integrations for SharePoint, Power Automate, you know, .NET and the whole like. And then about a year and a half ago, we said, well, I always wanted to go into end user tools, but, because you're building this great engine and it's all integrated in these people's apps and it's building blocks. And we ended up purchasing a workflow automation company. And the whole idea of all of it is to have a full service across all, like highly technical SDKs, integrations in marketplaces where companies and businesses are at, and then ultimately internal citizen developer processes that maybe don't fit into these SaaS platforms that are there. How could I cover all of them across it with the best in class document technology? And so the mission of the company is to evolve the way humans interact and experience documents. We like to say we're the building blocks because we're a little bit like Intel inside. You don't really know we're there, but we're a lot of places. That's the long story short.
Well, makes perfect sense, and thus kind of why I wanted to talk to you, because that workflow of documents is an area that really fascinates me right now, because this is an area that I felt like has been really problematic and difficult to implement up until, say, the past 24 months or so. Feels like there's a real revolution happening, and underneath all of the AI hype is a lot of really interesting stuff that can happen now in workflow. Talk to me a little bit about the last 24 months in the workflow space for me.
Yeah. So, the way I think about this is that there's been a lot of companies that have focused on everything but documents and workflow. And yet, we all know documents are centered to most business knowledge workflows. And it's the biggest pain point, right? And even before, you could license OCR technology or you need OCR technology and get you 80% there, 90% there. You need a human in the loop to make it right. Oh man, integrating data from this system to that system, connecting all these things. AI has ultimately made that easier, I would say, especially in like the RPA space and this whole idea of agentic workflows and this idea of monitoring and context awareness and things like this. Uh, but I do think at the same point, uh, VLMs, for instance, you saw Minstrel put out a VLM. They talked about how great their OCR was. It's actually not much better than algorithmic OCR solutions available. And in fact, it's significantly worse. So I think there's still this need in the workflow space for core based technology. But what AI has done is now I don't need, I don't know, implementation or generation of a workflow now. I can just talk to this thing. And if I train a model on it and I train it on like, hey, I can verbally communicate what I need this process to look like, what the workflow is going to be, and likely it can spit it out. Ultimately, though, what AI is really doing that I think we're kind of hitting at is this idea of unstructured data to structured data. And documents literally are just a container for ultimately structured data. And this has been the difficulty that we've had for a while is the human sees visually structured data, whereas to a computer that might be completely unstructured data, especially in a PDF. And the question is, how do I get the computer now, since it's ultimately dealing with this, interacting with it, to actually see it as structured data? And there's a lot of things that need to happen. This is where you get, this idea of big data and dark data, and all this stuff that people have had for years, I think. So it's an exciting time. It also, I think, it's an equalizer because it's bringing more people in that can actually build workflows and software around workflows into this space.
Now, I want to break through a little bit of the hype, and in particular, I know you've warned against the vanity projects in AI. Let's make that concrete for me. I'm sure you've got one or two really great examples of things that you can do now that you couldn't do before. Can you give me one or two of those?
Yeah, the perfect example is AI data extraction. We have a product, we call it AI data processing, but it's in our workflow space. And this is the classic, it's a RAG system, you know it. Like, I need to put all my documents in a directory or point to a directory, right? I need to have most of that data structured so that I can associate, I don't know, phone number, IBAN, bank account, right? First name, last name. It needs to be structured. So the actual data needs to be groomed and processed to be structured. And now all of a sudden I ask questions and it can answer in a large data set. It can summarize things. It can tell me various things. We have people that are using it for that, as well as, I know this sounds really simple because in our workflow product, we're really competing against paper here still. That's what people don't understand. Uh, and so just basic things like, I don't know, vendor onboarding. I hand my vendor a paper form, or they print out the form and write on it and then send it back to me as an image. And now I need someone to enter in the data, right? Well, now with AI and this, the combination of an algorithmic and AI approach, I can literally just visually look, give it the form and it automatically connects the data into my system. That's a person that does that currently at a lot of governments, a lot of enterprises, a lot of places. So that's the most concrete example. Other examples of it, I would tell you, are like redaction, is a common use case, and you've seen it. It used to be, and you have this world of PII or data security matters now. Well, in an algorithmic approach, I need to tell you every single thing to look for that's considered secure data or it's considered private information. And now in AI, I can just say, redact private information. And it understands the context of that word private so they can do it. So we've seen these use cases, translations and other summarizations and other querying, the common ones that I think, both in, especially in the workflow space are coming in. They think it's magic still, to be frank.
We'll be right back after this message. When chaos hits, will your system survive? Comet Backup's full image backups protect your entire system, files, apps, settings, and even the OS, in one powerful automated backup. Comet is easy to deploy and bandwidth efficient. Full system backups for Windows, for Linux, for servers, for endpoints, all in one centralized platform. Whether you get hit with ransomware, hardware failure, or accidental deletion, Comet restores your system to physical, VM, or the cloud. Short on time? Restore individual files or folders to access critical data within moments. Try Comet Backup today. Reliable, secure, and made to scale. Visit cometbackup.com to protect what matters most. Get $100 free credit when you sign up with the promo code MSP Radio. Comet Backup. Backup fast. Restore easy. And we're back. Now, I'm interested, how do you balance that? And particularly as a lawyer, I'm sure you have a thought on this. How do you balance the accountability required versus the machine automation? Because, I mean, if I think about like the element of, even just the form and entry that you've described, right? If somebody types it in, well, there's a responsibility for accuracy there that happens. Your redaction example is another great one, right? Like a lawyer is responsible for the redaction. And if they make a mistake, well, there's accountability there. But if we put it in the hands of the machine, how do we handle accountability in the process?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. One, because it's a core belief, like in the company. Notice how I said we're here to evolve humans' experience and interactions with documents. Some people say in AI, there's not going to be humans interacting with documents anymore. I completely disagree. And you brought up a perfect example. AI is a tool. That's what we need to get in our heads. It's a tool to accelerate humans. It's a tool to accelerate work. Now there are techniques you can do where because humans have an error rate as well. So don't trust that the human's right as well. And normally you have multiple reviews to get that error rate, within 1% or whatever standard or accurate. You can do this now modeling through AI as well as an algorithmic approach that you only need one human to review it instead of 5 humans reviewing it or something like this. But yes, the accountability of it and the question of how do you know leads to audit trails. And to me, the big thing in our workflow product, we're used in heavily regulated industries, very complex, processes. And the number one reason is the audit trail, because people need to have auditability of it. You need auditability in an AI world just as much as you need auditability in a human world. And to be honest with you, I think the future is this. Like, did the AI do this? What parts of it did the AI do? What parts of it did the human do? What was reviewed by the human? What was reviewed by another agent? This is changing work very quickly, but it's not changing the core requirements that humans need. You need someone to trust. I like to say, why don't we have autonomous driving? Because if it kills someone, who do we put in jail?
Right. That's exactly like, I mean, that's the extreme framing, but it's exactly the framing that I've been thinking about. And in particular, I'm kind of intrigued, like, technology in the legal field, you alluded to it, like people don't want to give up paper, right? Just simply because there is a process and a definition to that they understand. The legal realm in particular often struggles with adoption, despite the fact that they're looking for the better efficiency. Talk to me a little bit about how you're driving that change when you're fighting against something established like paper.
Yeah. I think I give a couple of examples and also say this about my time at a law firm. One, you have to realize how law firms are built. The people running law firms are not 40-year-old people, right? They're 65 and 70-year-old people. If they're at a good enough law firm, there's a attrition process or, get them out and bring new blood in. And they don't know technology very well. The fact that lawyers just in general aren't great at technology. And so they keep the stuff they have. I mean, I think the biggest technology change was like, I now, instead of talking to my paralegal, I talk to this voice recorder and it auto transcribes what I said. Amazing, right? But I also think it's because of the requirements and the risk you take as a lawyer if something goes bad. And we've seen this a little bit with AI, like paralegals using AI and putting hallucinated case law into briefs and stuff. I mean, under current ethics rules, at least in jurisdictions I were in, when you sign that brief, you're attesting to the validity of the information in the brief on your law license. And technically, if you can't attest to it and you do, you technically it's dishonest, and that dishonesty is the main way you lose your law license. So my point there is that the risk is, holy shit, I lose my ability to practice, do my job. And I lived that life for quite a while. Um, the other part of it, I think, is that the legal field in general is going through a little bit of a, do we want to become more efficient if we're charging per hour? How do we handle then if we're more efficient, but we charge per bucket of goods? And this is consulting worlds. This is, and legal is right in that. And so it's not naturally there to uh, optimize for speed and efficiency when doing work. So I think you have all these things kind of going on. The other big legal question, to be frank, and I think any lawyer knows this, and we just had one case that came out with the guy to do with Anthropic, and and I think Reddit also just sued Anthropic recently. So the question is, who owns what's being produced by it? And this is fair use and copyright. This is not, the courts are behind, and no one knows, and it's the wild, wild west. And there is a world that lives that a court case comes out and says, you guys don't own this shit. You owe this person over here a royalty.
It feels like that underlying risk of some of these models is a real threat to products that are being built on that. Are you thinking about that, and how are you talking to your own product people and your customers about that potential risk?
You know, uh, it's a business risk for sure. And I think the difference between a lawyer and a good business person is you realize everything is a business risk, whereas not everything is a legal risk. What I mean by that is, yeah, is there risk? If we don't provide this tooling, there's risk that the court case comes out and it's actually fair use, and then we're not there. So there's risk on both sides. And I think, you know, I ultimately think the Pandora's box has kind of been open, and the cat's out of the bag, if you want to say it. And I think the legal realm is going to be in a really uncomfortable position. The question though is whether they can monetize the data and stuff like that. And you saw even Cloudflare, I think recently, is trying to do this in limiting web scraping and allowing web scraping and allowing charging for web scraping of content. So I think this is evolving. It is the wild west. It's kind of like, I like to say AI right now is, I mean, I was young when the internet came out. This looks a lot like when the internet came out. It looks very similar. And there'll be a pivot period. There'll be a transition period. There'll be, we're at the peak of hype probably. There'll be a trough of disillusion, things like this. But it is interesting how you deal with it. I would tell you that in our workflow product in some of our, like government, for instance, is just outright like, no, like we can't do it. Or what they're looking at is things like, AWS Bedrock. And because it's more, I think the no is around security, less around privacy or property rights, for instance. And this gets into the other thing is like, who's training my data? How much data am I leaking? Am I leaking proprietary stuff? I mean, and I hate to say this, don't ever ask ChatGPT what it knows about you. You'll be afraid. It knows a lot. Um, so yeah.
Well, so as we sort of wrap up our time here, then, like, what are the elements how are you thinking about mitigating your company's organization's risk? Like, how do you think about that balance of where to lean into and where to be more cautious on?
Yeah. I actually think it's going to be an accelerator for our business. Because I think it's an accelerator for productivity. And some of this has been shown. I don't know, you hear Benioff, for instance, at Salesforce saying 50% of my code base is AI generated or something like that. Yet if you look at the number of people they're hiring, engineers they're hiring, for instance, they're hiring them the same pace they did before. The question is, if this thing is, gasoline in a car engine and I was on a bicycle, the question isn't how I don't need, more people on a bicycle. The question is how many more places can I go? How many more things can I produce? How much more value can I produce for customers? And the truth is that there'll always be, uh, let's say, a tech-driven software space and vendors that have a build versus buy idea. Should we build it internally and deal with it and maintain it? Or should we work with a platform, a partner that we can trust and we can rely on? And is the trade-off of those two profitable for me, right, as a business? That's going to be the same in an AI-driven world as it is today. Those things don't change. And if they do, it's like World War III. Like, don't invest in stocks, but what happens if World War III happens? We're all fucked. Like, so like you can't really think about AGI and these sort of things and put into place. So I'm more thinking about how can I provide value, because I ultimately think customers pay for value, and not everything with AI is providing value. It's just another way to do something else. It's actually not cheaper, maybe not even a better, more accurate way to do it currently. And who knows what it looks like in the future. So to me, the merge of these current solutions plus AI, that equals, it's really focused around product and value. What is my customer problem? How am I solving it for them? Is it solving it more efficiently? Is it saving them money? What helps their business? And how do I build solutions via an AI driven way, via an algorithmic way, however, that ultimately leads to more value, because customers are going to pay me whatever portion of that value. That's the business model that works in business all the time.
Well, it always comes back to value. Jonathan D. Rhyne is the co-founder and CEO of Nutrient, a global leader in AI-powered document SDKs, low-code solutions, and workflow automation. He's got a background in law with a JD from Campbell University. He bootstrapped Nutrient after leaving the legal practice in 2011 to solve the inefficiencies he experienced firsthand. Jonathan, thanks for joining me. This has been a great conversation. If people are interested in reaching out, what's the best way to do that?
I would say Twitter. I'm JD Rhyne. At JD Rhyne is a good way to reach out, or LinkedIn. By all means, is Jonathan D. Rhyne. You can find me on LinkedIn. Or come to Nutrient.io. Check us out. Send an email. I'm sure I can. If you put my name on it, it will get to me.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Thanks for joining me, Jonathan.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed or followed on your favorite platform. It's free and helps directly. Give us a review, too. If you want to support the show, visit patreon.com/MSP Radio, and you'll get access to content early. Or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Have a question you want answered? We take listener questions, send them in, ideally as a voice memo or video to question@mspradio.com. I answer listener questions live on our Wednesday live show on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you've got a comment or a thought on a story, put it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or reach out on LinkedIn if you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to advertise on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on our next episode.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.